So, it's the end of the 19th century. The Spanish-American War has just concluded. Spain, once a global empire, was clearly on the decline. The United States, on the other hand, was a rising power. The Treaty of Paris officially ended the war and Spain ceded the Philippines to the United States. The U.S. paid Spain $20 million for the islands. This acquisition was, for many Americans, quite a surprise. A whole archipelago, thousands of miles away, suddenly American territory. Why did Spain give up the Philippines? Their fleet had been famously defeated in Manila Bay by Commodore George Dewey. This victory signaled America's naval strength. Spain's control over its remaining colonies was crumbling. Filipino revolutionaries were already fighting for independence. Initial American reactions to acquiring the Philippines were mixed. Some saw it as a fantastic opportunity, new markets, naval bases, a chance to project American power into Asia. Others were deeply troubled. Did America really want to be a colonial power? Meanwhile, in the Philippines, people had their own ideas. Filipino nationalists, led by figures like Emilio Aguinaldo, had been fighting Spain. They hoped the U.S. would help them secure full independence from Spain. This fundamental misunderstanding would soon lead to more conflict. So, the U.S. now controlled the Philippines. What next? This sparked a massive debate back home. Should the Philippines be annexed? Should it eventually become a state? Proponents cited economic benefits and strategic location. Others invoked the white man's burden, a paternalistic and frankly racist idea. And of course, strategic location, a naval base in the Pacific. Key figures pushed hard for keeping the Philippines. President McKinley prayed for guidance and decided to take the islands. Senators like Albert J. Beveridge were vocal imperialists. They argued it was America's destiny to expand its influence. But there was strong opposition too. The American Anti-Imperialist League was formed in 1898. Its members included Mark Twain, Andrew Carnegie, and William Jennings Bryan. They argued colonialism violated core American values. They also worried about the costs and potential for endless wars. The debate over statehood specifically was even more fraught. Most who wanted to keep the Philippines saw it as a territory, not as a future state with equal rights and representation. The idea of millions of Filipinos becoming U.S. citizens and sending representatives to Congress, that was a bridge too far for many. Racial prejudices were deeply ingrained. The Supreme Court cases known as the Insular cases would later rule that the Constitution did not fully apply to territories. So, the Philippines was foreign in a domestic sense. Complicated, right? So, the U.S. now controlled the Philippines. What next? This sparked a massive debate back home. Should the Philippines be annexed? Should it eventually become a state? Proponents cited economic benefits and strategic location. Others invoked the white man's burden, a paternalistic and frankly racist idea. Key figures pushed hard for keeping the Philippines. President McKinley prayed for guidance and decided to take the islands. But there was strong opposition too. The American Anti-Imperialist League was formed in 1898. They argued colonialism violated core American values. The debate raged, but the U.S. government decided to keep the Philippines. This decision was not well received by Filipino nationalists. They had fought for independence, not a new colonial master. So, the Philippine-American War broke out in 1899. It was a brutal and bloody conflict. Estimates vary, but hundreds of thousands of Filipinos died. Once military resistance was largely suppressed, the U.S. established a colonial administration. President McKinley declared a policy of benevolent assimilation. The idea was to win over Filipinos by improving their lives. The U.S. invested in infrastructure, roads, bridges, ports. They focused on public health, sanitation, hospitals, and a big emphasis was placed on education. Thousands of American teachers called Thomasites went to the Philippines. They established a public school system. English became the primary language of instruction in schools. This was a deliberate policy to unify the diverse linguistic groups and tie the Philippines closer to the United States. Economically, American rule brought significant changes. The Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act of 1909 established free trade between the U.S. and the Philippines. Certain Filipino products like sugar and coconut oil got preferential access to U.S. markets. This benefited wealthy Filipino landowners and American businesses, but it also made the Philippine economy highly dependent on the U.S. The colonial economy was designed to serve the colonizer. Even after the Philippine-American War officially ended, resistance continued. It just took different forms. Some groups kept fighting. Guerrilla warfare persisted in some regions for years. Leaders like Macario Sakai declared their own republics. The US military labeled them as bandits. Their movements were eventually suppressed, but the desire for Kalayaan freedom did not die. It simply shifted from the battlefield to the political arena. A new generation of Filipino leaders emerged. They pursued independence through peaceful political means. Political parties were formed. The most prominent was the Nacionalista Party. Its platform was clear immediate independence. Figures like Manuel L. Quezon and Sergio Osmeña became dominant. They were skilled politicians who learned to navigate the American colonial system. A key strategy was lobbying directly in Washington, D.C. Filipino independence missions were regularly sent to the United States. Quezon and Osmeña often led these delegations. They argued that Filipinos were capable of self-government. Gradually, the U.S. did grant more self-governance. The Jones Act of 1916 explicitly promised independence for the Philippines. The catch? Independence would be granted once a stable government could be established. The early 20th century was a turbulent time globally. World War I erupted in Europe in 1914. The United States joined the war in 1917. The Philippines, as a U.S. territory, supported the American war effort. Thousands of Filipinos volunteered for service. The Philippine legislature offered resources and manpower. This loyalty was noted by American policymakers. The war amplified calls for self-determination worldwide. The interwar period brought new dynamics. The Roaring Twenties saw economic boom in the U.S., but then came the Great Depression in 1929. This impacted American attitudes towards the Philippines. Some American industries felt threatened. They faced competition from duty-free Philippine products. Labor unions opposed Filipino immigration. Meanwhile, Japan was rising in Asia. Japan had its own imperial ambitions. The Philippines' strategic location became a concern. For the U.S., the islands were an important naval outpost, but they were also seen as a vulnerability. Defending the Philippines from Japan would be difficult. Then came World War II. Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and invaded the Philippines. The shared experience of fighting forged strong bonds. So why didn't the Philippines become a U.S. state? The post-World War II context is crucial here. The United States emerged as a global superpower, but the world was changing. The old European colonial empires were crumbling. A wave of decolonization was sweeping across Asia and Africa. The idea of the U.S. holding on to a colony? It just didn't fit the New World Order. The Tydings-McDuffie Act passed in 1934. It established a 10-year transitional period. At the end of those 10 years, full independence. World War II interrupted this timeline, but the commitment to independence was enshrined in U.S. law, and most importantly, Filipinos wanted independence, sovereignty, Kalayaan. And so, on July 4th, 1946, the Philippines became an independent republic. Yes, July 4th. The same day as American Independence Day. This date was chosen by the United States. It was meant to symbolize the shared democratic ideals. Later, the Philippines changed its Independence Day to June 12th. This commemorates Emilio Aguinaldo's Declaration of Independence from Spain in 1898. Even after independence, the special relationship between the U.S. and the Philippines continued. The U.S. maintained large military bases in the Philippines for decades. Subic Bay Naval Base and Clark Air Base were strategically vital during the Cold War. Economic ties remained strong. Trade, investment, cultural exchange also flourished. American popular culture is widespread in the Philippines, and a large Filipino diaspora developed in the United States. This created deep people-to-people connections, but also, at times, a sense of continued American influence. Could the Philippines have become a U.S. state? It's a what-if question, fun to speculate. But the historical currents were overwhelmingly against it. The legal framework, American public opinion, global political trends, and crucially, Filipino aspirations for self-rule. The story of the Philippines and its relationship with the United States is multifaceted. It's a story of colonialism, yes, but also of education and infrastructure. And that, ultimately, is a story of independence achieved.